Trapped by the belief that I'm not good enough, bound by the limitations and the lies that consumed my world, this was me. It wasn't until I took the biggest leap in my life to know and trust the power within. And it was at that moment I made a choice. My past will not define me anymore. Hello, I am Teri, and I know I am not alone in this. Over the years, I have found that the number one mistake that we make is that we get in the way of our own success story. Yes, I said it. On this show, together we'll tackle limiting beliefs, self sabotage, getting stuck, fear, doubt, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome. Join us on this journey designed to transport you beyond your limitations to a world where anything is possible. This is Talking with Teri. Hello, and welcome back to Talking with Teri, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And I'm so delighted to have our guest today. I met our guest last week or 2 weeks ago in Dallas, and I can't wait. And I'm flying back in next week to connect and be on your show. So this guest is Doreen Milano. She is a Net Revenue Acceleration Strategist. Isn't that like a whole bunch of sexiness rolled into one? And she's the executive business coach. She's a published author and the host of Big Ideas, Small Business TV with Doreen Milano. So Doreen, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
It's so excited to be here, and I'm excited to see you again in your studio next week. So, for folks that don't know you yet, bring us up to speed. Like, tell me, kind of your journey to how you got to be where you're at today.
Well, it's been a long journey because it started when I was 2.
Oh, heavens. Yeah. Well, I think most people's journeys, right?
Right.
When we're born, but
I was born in a very entrepreneurial family.
Oh, yes.
And when you're in a group of Italians and they're all entrepreneurs, as kids, you're free labor.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Right? So I got to learn business from my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my grandfather, my father, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, yada, yada, yada. So the bottom line here is when you go through a process like that, you get the nuances that you don't ever get in education.
Agreed. And I think it's so fascinating because I used to be a therapist, and we talk about the development and everything in the first 3 years of your life is the most critical because of what is happening in the brain. And the next kind of critical point is up to like age 5. But I'm just thinking about like your juicy little brain, like absorbing in all this yumminess. Now, I've always said to myself that I've always wanted to listen to books and CDs and just absorb that information. So now I get to talk to somebody who had that experience.
Yes. So, I learned how to count by sorting pop bottles for my grandfather's construction business because he had all these soda machines. So I had to sort them by color and size and so on and so forth. And then I had to group them in groups of 5.
Got it. Yeah.
And I was about 2.5 years old.
Oh my heavens.
And so that was my job for a while because that's something I could do.
Yeah.
So, as you get older, they just added more stuff and more stuff and more stuff.
And continue to see like all like you're right, that the little nuances that goes into the business, because I think, and you're a speaker, this, that like when you're standing up and you're speaking about business and you're speaking about, we give the high level, right? And, you can get into the weeds really quickly, but, yes, the weeds is part of the process too, to kind of.
It is part of the process. Yes.
But it's amazing to kind of think of like all the little things that you learned along this pathway of entrepreneurship. And, it's just, I'm excited to hear this journey for you. So you were very early on introduced and indoctrinated into the entrepreneur world.
Yes. And we had weekly family dinners that were anywhere from 30 to 130 people.
Wowzer.
And just about everybody had their own businesses. My uncle was the president of the Pacific Stock Exchange. I don't know if they still have one or not, but way back then.
Yeah.
And so there were real estate agents, there were engineers, there were butchers, there were shop owners, there were contractors. My great grandmother had hot houses in
Oh,
San
okay.
Francisco, and she specialized in doing custom carnations. And she specialized in how they smelled and the aromas that they gave.
Yeah.
And she would take them down to the flower mart every morning. So, I mean, there was all kinds of different businesses. There were all kinds of different things that you got to be exposed to
Wonderful.
as a kid. So I ended up running 3 corporations when I was about 18, 19 years old.
Wow.
My father's businesses. And then when he died, divested a few years after that, I went to work in the automotive industry. So I spent my youth in male-dominated industries, did a lot of work on the racing circuits, did a lot of work on within dealerships. And you really have to develop who you are to be able to hold your own and hold your weight.
Yeah, especially in a male-dominated industry. Like I'm curious how that experience for such a long time has impacted who you are today.
I speak my mind, I'm very direct, and I don't.
That's not an easy, I've had a couple of guests on here before that have been in some certain industries where they've had to learn to create that thick skin. And that's a skill within itself to learn.
It's a painful process.
Yeah.
I mean, there are times that I really tried to keep the emotion out of my day-to-day. But there are times that I would just went home and I just went, oh, I can't handle this anymore.
Yeah. Well, what was that? Let's take a little deeper dive here, because I think that's important. Whether the listeners that are listening today is, in more of a male dominated industry, or just in like a more of a, almost like a female dominated industry too, because I think we can see some of those similar traits different. They're similar, but different.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about, how that process was for you.
Well, it was really getting to the point where you understood that the comments, even though they may be cutting and they may hurt, were not meant that way. Right?
Right.
Sometimes
Yeah.
they were constructive criticism. Sometimes they were about dominance. And for the male side, it was really easy to be able to understand which ones were dominance and which ones were corrective criticism.
Right.
Where it got to be more difficult is when you had the mean girls show up. So in male-dominated industries, such as the motorcycle world or the automotive world, oftentimes you have females that come in thinking that the only way they can survive is to have the male-dominated energy be their go-to energy. And at that point, the comments may sound the same, but they're not intended the same.
Say more about that.
Well, in the mean girl realm, when you dealt with that, and I was a manager, an executive in the automotive industry, and so I got to see a lot of this. But you'll have people saying yes to your face and then backstabbing you, and you'll have people that are just giving you lip service and really don't want to engage. You'll have people, this is over many, many years. Now, I've developed a skill set where I just say, did you really mean that way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did you intend?
Feedback? Yeah.
Did you intend for that to come out sounding like it does sound?
Right. And that's a great point, because I think sometimes if we don't have that skin developed, that I don't want to say it's that level of vulnerability that we have if we were to stand up and say something, right?
Right.
So, for you being able to have that wherewithal and develop that over time to say, no, like, let's have a conversation around this, and versus me taking it on, me personalizing it, me then going and creating this fabulous, amazing, incredible, really unbelievable story around what that actually means and looks like, right? Versus
Right.
just saying, okay, let's just
Because we are meaning making machines. As human beings, that's what we do.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So I found that in the plethora of years that I was in that industry, it was such an incredible waste of energy and waste of time to not just stand up and say, did you really mean that way?
Yeah.
What are you really trying to say? Make it really simple for me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a power in that, and owning that and being able to really address that head on. And I think that's something every one of us can, sometimes it's not, it is finessing how we say it, because we don't want to get, if they're giving off
You
this,
don't
like,
want to confront at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Right?
it's like, how do we say it in a way that's, coming from our greatest and highest good, and, there to serve and be constructive. And so, how can we do that in that way so it's being more constructive on both ends?
Exactly. And sometimes it's about having a conversation about you being more vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? And mirroring what you want the other individual to do.
Right. That's so powerful too. And recognizing, because we all have lenses. We're all looking through lenses,
Right.
every experience that we have in life and in business, we have our own invisible lenses that we're looking through everything through. And so I was just having this conversation earlier today around this concept of, how we see something can be very different than the world sees it, that doesn't
Absolutely.
have those same lenses as us.
Yes. So, I used many different techniques. Sometimes somebody would say something, it would hit me sideways. And I just walk over and I go, how was your morning?
Mm. Yeah, a little bit disarming in that sense.
What happened this morning?
Yeah. And not taking, I mean, that to me, that tells me that you're not taking it personally, but that's,
No.
how did you get to that place? Because I'm guessing in the beginning that you might have taken those comments or those, that feedback, or personally.
Personally, yeah.
Yeah. How did you, because that is, you know, that's not easy to do. And I see a lot, and I've had multiple clients of mine have this conversation where something has happened externally out from them. It could be a client, it could be a referral partner, it could be whatever it was, and something was said, and they didn't have the courage maybe at the time to say something, to confront it. And so
Yeah.
they took it, and they said, you know what, I'm going to make this great story. And then they now throw themselves off their game, and now they're avoiding the person because they don't want to call this person back. They don't want to have a conversation
That's because nobody got to the bottom of the line and told
exactly.
their truth.
And they have now wasted, not, and sometimes this is part of the process, so I don't want to feel like it's wasted, but they've wasted their energy, they've wasted their time on the situation. And it could have been easily, okay, let's clear this up, and then let's,
What was the process?
yeah, like, what is that process? What does that
Okay,
look like?
so
Yeah.
the process started with somebody comes at me and goes, yeah, whatever it is. I do not respond for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And you just sit with it. You don't do anything with it. And and just notice what emotions are coming up for you. Are you getting angry? Are you hurt? Are you betrayed? Are you sad? Are you happy? What's going on for you?
Yeah.
And then you show up the next day and you go, can we have a conversation about yesterday?
Yeah.
Is that okay? I may have just been having a really bad day, but there's something you said that really kind of bothered.
Yeah.
But you can't do that in the heat of the moment. You have to have the discipline to wait the 24 hours and really internalize what that conversation is for you internally. So you don't have to come from that place in that conversation, right? And as you develop that skill set, then you get to a point where somebody can say something and you can say, hey, did you really mean that?
Yeah.
How could you say that differently? Because it kind of hit me sideways.
Yeah. And I think it just starts with one conversation, start small, start with one and work up that muscle. I think anytime we're learning a new skill, a new way of doing things, it is a skill. It's one way of just continuing to work that muscle. And
the best advice I ever received with regards to that process is shut your mouth and wait 24 hours before you respond.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when you're having that conversation with them, I have a good friend and he says, he always says we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth. Yeah. And he says, we've got to listen more than we talk, and just giving that space and place for the person to, really, having an understanding of where that person is coming from. And oftentimes it's simply, understanding that piece of it that makes all the difference.
I mean, when you're an executive in any kind of business, you've got things coming at you 24/7. I mean, just because you walk out the door at 5 o'clock doesn't mean that the entourage of information, data, phone calls, emails, whatever, stop.
Yes.
You get on phone, you get home, you get on the phone, you get online, and it continues.
Yeah.
Right? So taking that 24 hours to really let things settle. Sometimes it's about somebody needed to get your attention and they wanted you to engage.
Yeah.
And you then just so focused on your minutia that you weren't hearing that request.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just that they're having a bad day and they're sharing the wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one way of looking at it, right? Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic. So I think some great nuggets that, again, whether you're in a male dominated or a female dominated, it comes back to, sometimes, in just life in general, we may be receiving feedback that we don't care for, or, people are coming from, maybe not the greatest and highest good on their end. They might be having that bad day. They might be, who knows where they are coming from. I think it's our duty to be really clear on what is ours. Okay. What do we own, and what is theirs, and what do they get to own, and whether they're owning it or not, it's not our responsibility to own it for them.
Correct.
Right. And so when we can be really clear and say, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be my best self today, and whatever that looks like. And this goes back into kind of, looking at, life as we respond to it versus reacting to it.
Right.
And like you said, giving us the space, the 24 hours before you communicate with them, sit with those feelings, really, take a deep dive and look at and reflect back onto you, is there something that you could have changed? Is this really on them? What am I going to own? What are they going to own? And then, then going back to them and having this conversation from a place of, I'm going to say love. I don't know that they really say that in the business world, but, coming from a place of
respect
and of love and respect, and just, hey, you're a human. I'm a human. Let's come together and let's have a conversation around this so that this doesn't have to continue to fester and build and grow and become like this cancerous, thing where it's eating up my life and eating up.
And that's where a lot of lawsuits happen.
Yes. Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
I've been privy to some really bizarre lawsuits when, people were joking around and the individual they were joking with took it all very personally. And it got out of hand, and there were,
Yeah.
discrimination lawsuits and all kinds of things that were going on.
Yes.
And, it wasn't about color, it wasn't about race, but it was about something else.
Yeah.
And nobody had the guts to start telling the truth.
Yeah. And that's something definitely we want. We wanted to prevent that, that,
Yes.
and be in the place that doesn't have to go down that path. Right. That's like the ultimate.
And my truth is not the same as your truth,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So can we agree on that?
Yeah.
To start with.
Agreed.
And then let's give you ample opportunity to tell your truth. I have ample opportunity to tell my truth. And then we can see what happens when we meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility?
Yeah. And I think this is great for just any life situation, including families, including our relatives, including.
Well, family business is a real mishmash. It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just lay it out the way it is.
Yeah.
Family business is not easy.
No, I have several clients that that are involved in their high level in the family business, and
It's not easy.
that's a different animal. I mean, we could have a whole different conversation.
We could have
on that, like a whole different conversation on that piece of it. So for the listeners that have been listening and want to find out more about you, because they want to connect or collaborate in some way, where can our listeners find out more information about you?
Well, you can go to capital V number 2 E.biz. That's my website address.
Okay.
V2E.biz. You can start there. I also have an academy, which is V2Eacademy.com. And that academy gives you some of the basics that you need in business.
Perfect.
So
it's that foundation.
It's coaching that any business can afford.
Awesome. I love it.
I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I will drop all that information down in the show notes. So don't you worry. Her information will be there. And thank you, Doreen, for being here today. And I look forward to connecting next week.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
Awesome. Thank you. I am so grateful that you joined me for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, then there's just one thing that I would like you to do. Click to subscribe and leave me a rating and review. As my way to thank you, let's connect for a free consultation. Just reach out to me at talkingwithteri, that's TERI.com, to book your time.